World War I, also known as the Great War, changed the course of history. It was a devastating conflict that reshaped countries, introduced new warfare, and ultimately set the stage for much of the 20th century. But how did it all start, and what happened over those 4 brutal years? In today's video, we'll break down the causes, key events, and the lasting impact of World War I, the road to war. To understand World War I, we need to go back to the political landscape of Europe in the early 1900s. At this time, Europe was a continent of empires. The British, the French, the German, the Austro-Hungarian, and the Russian empires all controlled vast territories and wielded significant power. But these empires were also tangled in a web of alliances, which made the continent a ticking time bomb. The main alliances were the Triple Alliance, made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, and the Triple Entente, which included France, Russia, and Great Britain. These alliances were meant to maintain a balance of power, but also meant that any small conflict could drag multiple countries into war. Another critical factor was militarism. Countries were building massive armies and navies, prepared to go to war if needed. This buildup of military power fueled tensions and created a climate of fear and suspicion. And, of course, nationalism was rising. In places like the Balkans, people wanted independence from larger empires, while others, like Germany, wanted more influence on the world stage. The spark that ignited World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, on June 28, 1914. Ferdinand was visiting Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, when he and his wife were shot by Gavrilo Princip, a member of a Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand. Austria-Hungary, furious over the assassination, blamed Serbia and issued a series of demands, many of which Serbia agreed to. But Austria-Hungary wasn't satisfied, and, with Germany's backing, declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. This declaration triggered the alliance system. Russia, bound by treaty to Serbia, began to mobilize its forces. Germany then declared war on Russia, and shortly after, on Russia's ally, France. When Germany invaded Belgium to reach France, Britain declared war on Germany. Within weeks, the major powers of Europe were all at war. The fighting begins. The war quickly turned into a brutal stalemate, especially on the Western Front, where German forces faced off against the French, British, and later American soldiers. Both sides dug extensive networks of trenches, creating what we now know as trench warfare. The soldiers lived in muddy, cramped conditions, facing constant threats from artillery, machine guns, and poison gas. On the Eastern Front, Germany and Austria-Hungary fought against Russia in a more fluid but equally devastating conflict. The Ottoman Empire joined the war on the side of the Central Powers, opening new fronts in the Middle East and the Balkans. World War I also saw the introduction of new weapons and technologies, including tanks, airplanes, and chemical weapons like mustard gas. These innovations made the war deadlier and more destructive than any previous conflict. Major battles and turning points. Several key battles defined the war. The Battle of Verdun, fought between the Germans and the French in 1916, was one of the longest and deadliest battles of the war. It lasted for 10 months, with hundreds of thousands of casualties on both sides. The Battle of the Somme, also in 1916, saw British forces try to break through German lines. On the first day alone, the British suffered 57,000 casualties, marking one of the bloodiest days in British military history. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, Russia struggled against Germany and Austria-Hungary. Russia's military was poorly equipped and organized, leading to massive losses. The Russian people grew frustrated with the war and their government, eventually leading to the Russian Revolution in 1917. This revolution led to the overthrow of the Tsar and the establishment of a communist government, which signed a peace treaty with Germany, ending Russia's involvement in the war. The United States enters the war. For the first few years, the United States tried to stay neutral, but Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare, where German U-boats attacked any ship heading toward Britain, brought the U.S. closer to war. In 1915, a German submarine sank the British passenger ship Lusitania, killing 1,200 people, including 128 Americans. In 1917, Germany sent the infamous Zimmermann telegram to Mexico, proposing a military alliance against the United States. When the British intercepted and shared this telegram with the U.S., it was the final straw. In April 1917, the United States declared war on Germany, joining the Allies. American forces arrived in Europe in large numbers in 1918. Fresh and well-equipped, they gave the Allies a much-needed boost, helping turn the tide of the war. The end of the war. In 1918, the Allies launched a series of successful attacks known as the 100 Days Offensive. With American forces bolstering their lines, the Allies pushed the Germans back. Facing mounting losses and dwindling resources, Germany could no longer sustain the fight. By November 1918, the Central Powers were collapsing. Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire signed armistices. And on November 9th, the German Kaiser, Wilhelm II, abdicated. 2 days later, on November 11th, 1918, at 11 a.m., Germany signed an armistice, ending the fighting. This date is now commemorated as Armistice Day, or Remembrance Day, the Treaty of Versailles and aftermath. In 1919, the victorious Allies met in Paris to negotiate the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty imposed heavy penalties on Germany, including the loss of territory, significant military restrictions, and massive reparations payments. Germany was also forced to accept full responsibility for the war, a clause known as the War Guilt Clause. The treaty's harsh terms created resentment in Germany and laid the groundwork for future conflicts. Many historians believe that the Treaty of Versailles contributed to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the outbreak of World War II. Just 2 decades later, human cost and lasting impact. World War I was devastating. Over 16 million people died, including soldiers and civilians. Entire landscapes were destroyed, and the psychological scars ran deep. The war also changed society in profound ways. Women took on new roles in the workforce, as many men were at the front. After the war, women in several countries, including the UK and the US, gained the right to vote. The war also led to the collapse of empires. The Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, Russian, and German empires all disintegrated, leading to the creation of new countries in Europe and the Middle East. But these borders, hastily drawn, would fuel conflicts in the years to come. Lessons of World War I. World War I was supposed to be the war to end all wars, but as we know, it didn't. However, it did lead to the formation of the League of Nations, an early attempt at international cooperation to prevent future conflicts. Though the League ultimately failed, its ideals inspired the creation of the United Nations after World War II. The Great War showed the world the horrors of modern, industrialized warfare. The trauma it caused, both physically and psychologically, affected a whole generation. The poets, writers, and artists who survived it captured this trauma, and their works remind us of the brutal cost of war. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more historical breakdowns. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think is the most important lesson we should remember from World War I? Until next time, stay curious, stay informed.